Hello, thank you for downloading this video cast. The topic is MedDRA Structure and Scope. I will discuss the organization and content of MedDRA. MedDRA was designed by the International Conference on Harmonization as a standard, internationally accepted, multilingual terminology for sharing regulatory information for human medical products. The activities of the MedDRA Maintenance and Support Services Organization, the MSSO, are overseen by an ICH Management Board, which is composed of the ICH parties and regulatory bodies of the UK, Health Canada, and the World Health Organization. The MSSO serves to maintain, develop, and distribute MedDRA. Later in this presentation, I will discuss MSSO tools and services available to you. This is standard MedDRA ownership information, which states that material in this presentation may be used, modified, or distributed as long as the ICH copyright is acknowledged. I will begin with the scope of MedDRA. Let's focus first on the blue circle, what's within the scope of MedDRA. The first four listed in the circle describe what we typically know to be adverse events, diseases, diagnoses, signs, symptoms. But MedDRA also includes therapeutic indications, names of investigations, and the qualitative results of investigations, such as increased, decreased. MedDRA includes terms related to medical and surgical procedures, medical, social, family history. Although social circumstances are not usually regarded as medical terms, they fall within the medical scope if they are relevant to the evaluation of regulatory data. For example, in the assessment of treatment outcome in the light of exposure to risk factors. An example is occupational exposure to toxic agent. MedDRA includes terms related to medication errors which can lead to adverse events. So terms related to overdoses, for example, are included. Also within the scope of MedDRA are product quality and device issues, such as product contamination and sterility issues, label and packaging issues. MedDRA includes terms inherited from legacy terminologies like COSTART, HUART. What's outside the scope of MedDRA? MedDRA is not a drug dictionary. Of note here, however, is that a few generic names of some commonly used products, such as digoxin, are included as lowest level terms with their associated adverse events. An example here is digoxin level increased. Patient demographic terms, gender, age, race, religion, are outside the scope of MedDRA. Although MedDRA does generally exclude terms with demographic descriptors, some terms with gender qualifiers are included if the gender renders a concept unique, such as breast cancer female, breast cancer male, infertility female, infertility male. Clinical trial design terms and frequency qualifiers, such as rare, frequent, are generally outside the scope of MedDRA. Numerical values for results are not included. Severity descriptors are not included. Severe and mild are used only when pertinent to the specificity of the term, such as severe versus mild mental retardation. And finally, just as MedDRA is not a drug dictionary, it is not an equipment, device, diagnostic product terminology. So you can see that the scope of MedDRA is comprehensive and includes a wide variety of clinical information used throughout the regulatory process, not just adverse events. We've reviewed the scope of MedDRA, now the structure. The developers of the terminology designed a structure that promotes specific and comprehensive data entry and flexible data retrieval. Relationships between terms in the terminology fall into two categories: hierarchy and equivalence. The 5 levels of the hierarchy are the system organ class, referred to as SOC, the high-level group term, the high-level term, the preferred term, and the lowest level term. The hierarchy provides degrees or levels of superordination and subordination. The superordinate term is a broad grouping term applicable to each subordinate descriptor linked to it. Levels of the hierarchy, therefore, represent vertical links in the terminology. There is increased specificity and increased number of terms moving down from the SOC level. The second category of relationships in the structure of MedDRA is equivalence. The equivalence relationship groups synonymous terms or equivalent terms under preferred terms, the single medical concept. The LLTs under the PTs are synonyms, lexical variants are quasi-synonyms for PTs. LLTs are words or phrases that mean the same thing or that are used as another name for something. For example, the terms arrhythmia, dysrhythmia, cardiac arrhythmia, cardiac dysrhythmia all convey the same meaning. LLTs are very specific and are used for coding verbatim. Notice how many more LLTs there are than PTs. These are MedDRA term level definitions based on hierarchy and equivalence. System organ class, the highest level of the terminology, distinguished by anatomical or physiological system, etiology, or purpose. More details about the SOC level on the next slide. Below the SOC level is the high-level group term, subordinate to SOC, superordinate to one or more high-level terms. HLGTs group HLTs to aid retrieval by broader concepts. An HLGT is linked to at least one SOC and to at least one HLT, the next levels up and down in the hierarchy, but there is no limit to the number of SOCs to which an HLGT can be linked. The high-level term is subordinate to HLGT and is a superordinate descriptor for one or more preferred terms. An HLT links PTs related to it by anatomy, physiology, etiology, or purpose. The HLGTs and HLTs are grouping terms used for analysis and presentation. The preferred term represents a single medical concept. Recalling what we saw earlier on the scope slide within the blue circle, a PT is a distinct descriptor for a symptom, sign, disease, diagnosis, therapeutic indication, investigation, surgical or medical procedure, and medical, social, or family history characteristic. PTs are unambiguous and self-descriptive in the context of international requirements. A PT is linked to at least one SOC, but can be linked to as many SOCs as is appropriate. The lowest level terms are the most specific level of the terminology. An LLT is linked to only one PT as a synonym, lexical variant, or quasi-synonym. Lexical variants are different word forms for the same expression, such as biopsy tongue and tongue biopsy. Quasi-synonyms are terms that are not precisely the same meaning as another term, but are treated as synonymous in a given terminology. These include site and laterality descriptions. Coding of verbatim terms is done at the LLT level. One LLT is identical to its PT for data entry purposes. All SOCs are displayed here. As mentioned earlier, SOCs, the highest level of the terminology, comprise groupings by three categories: anatomy, physiology, or etiology, or purpose. SOC terms based on anatomy or physiology are also referred to as site of manifestation, or organ site where the sign or symptom is evident. Examples of SOCs based on anatomy, physiology, site of manifestation are the SOC cardiac disorders and the SOC eye disorders. An example of etiology, the cause of an abnormal condition, is SOC infections and infestations. And a grouping by purpose example is SOC surgical and medical procedures. The exception to these three groupings is the SOC social circumstances, which contains information about the person, not the adverse event. This SOC provides a grouping for factors that may give insight into personal issues that could have an effect on the event being reported, such as drug abuser or tobacco user. Some SOCs on this slide are blue and underlined. This is simply to make you aware that the location of terms within these SOCs is perhaps not so intuitive. In SOC General Disorders and Administration Site Conditions, for example, are terms related to product quality issues. In SOC Injury, Poisoning, and Procedural Complications are terms related to medication errors and overdoses. It is important to become familiar with and to search these SOCs during data analysis. We've discussed general characteristics of each level of the MedDRA hierarchy. In this example, you see specific lowest level terms and their relationship to a PT within the SOC cardiac disorders. Of all the LLTs associated with the PT arrhythmia, only 4 are displayed here to convey some points about LLTs. As stated earlier, an LLT is linked to only one PT as a synonym, lexical variant, or quasi-synonym. The LLT concepts arrhythmia not otherwise specified, arrhythmia, dysrhythmias are synonyms for the PT arrhythmia. We've talked about a characteristic of MedDRA that one LLT is also identical to its PT, so the term arrhythmia at the PT level is also listed as an LLT. The LLT Other Specified Cardiac Dysrhythmias in red is flagged non-current. Non-current terms in MedDRA are flagged at the LLT level and are not recommended for continued use. These terms may derive from terminologies incorporated into early versions of MedDRA. LLTs with a non-current flag are maintained in MedDRA to preserve historical data for retrieval and analysis. Terms that are vague, ambiguous, outdated, truncated, or misspelled carry a non-current flag. But again, LLTs are not deleted in MedDRA. Rather, they are flagged as non-current. MedDRA codes. Within MedDRA, code refers to the 8-digit number assigned to each term. Each term has a unique non-expressive code, which means that no information can be derived from the digits within the code. Initially, the codes were assigned in alphabetical order, starting with 1, 6 zeros, 1, but that's no longer the case. New terms added to the terminology are assigned the next sequential number. Previously used MedDRA codes are usually not reused. MedDRA is versioned biannually, but subscribers may submit requests for a term change or addition at any time. Supplemental terms are terms that are approved change requests. The MSSO process for change requests includes International Medical Team Review. Within 7 calendar days from initial receipt, approved change requests are designated as supplemental changes to MedDRA and are posted on the MSSO website for review by all subscribers. These are known as supplemental terms and are assigned codes. A characteristic in the structure of MedDRA is multi-axiality. The 26 SOCs represent parallel axes that are not mutually exclusive. Multi-axiality allows a term to be represented in more than one SOC and to be grouped by different classifications, for example by etiology or by manifestation site, which allows retrieval and presentation via different data sets. Multi-axiality reflects the inherent complexity within medicine, where a concept often cannot be pigeonholed into a single classification. The purpose of primary SOC is to determine which SOC will represent a PT during cumulative data outputs. The primary SOC is used to support consistent data presentation for reporting to regulators. The terminology is structured so that the selection of a data entry term leads to automatic assignment of grouping terms higher in the hierarchy. This is an example of a multi-axial PT, influenza. Because influenza is a viral disorder, it is linked to SOC infections and infestations, and because the primary site of manifestation of influenza is respiratory, it is also linked to the SOC respiratory, thoracic, and mediastinal disorders. About 40% of PTs in MedDRA are multi-axial, most with links to 2 SOCs. The record holder with the most links is the PT charge syndrome, a complex syndrome of birth defects, with links to 8 SOCs. Not all SOCs express multi-axiality. Terms in these 3 SOCs reside only within these SOCs. These can be thought of as support SOCs for recording case information and for developing queries. Surgical and medical procedures, for example, may occur in the treatment of an adverse event, as an associated condition related to the indication for a medical product, or as medical history. Primary SOC allocation is an important feature of MedDRA. Each PT has a primary SOC that determines the SOC under which the term appears in cumulative data outputs. This is required because of what we have just reviewed, that PTs may be represented in more than one SOC, that is, they may be multi-axial. Primary SOC allocation prevents a PT from being displayed more than once, avoids double counting. These are the rules for primary SOC allocation. PTs for diseases, signs, and symptoms are assigned to Prime Manifestation Site SOC. That's the easy and logical rule. However, there are 3 exceptions to the assignment of PTs to Prime Manifestation Site. Congenital and hereditary anomaly terms have SOC congenital, familial, and genetic disorders as primary SOC. Neoplasm terms have SOC neoplasms, benign, malignant, and unspecified, including cysts and polyps, as primary SOC. There is an exception to the exception, however, within the neoplasm SOC. Because cells in cysts and polyps are mostly considered non-neoplastic, cysts and polyps have their prime manifestation site as primary SOC. For example, the PT intestinal polyp has primary SOC gastrointestinal with secondary SOC neoplasms. Infections and infestation terms have SOC infections and infestations as primary SOC. These rules for primary SOC allocation are very important. Primary SOC allocation is hardwired into the MedDRA ASCII files and should not be modified by users. More information about primary SOC allocation is available in a streaming video on the MSSO website. In addition to the rules for primary SOC allocation, there is a rule of primary SOC priority when a PT is in one of these 3 SOCs. SOC priority rules are based on the importance of being able to review aggregate safety data and detect critical congenital, neoplastic, and infection signals. If a PT links to more than one of the exceptions, the following priority will be used to determine primary SOC. First, congenital, second, neoplasms, third, infections and infestations. An example of this is the PT congenital HIV infection. According to primary SOC priority, the primary SOC is congenital. Secondary SOCs include infections, immune system disorders, pregnancy, and perinatal conditions. There is no ranking for secondary SOCs. The MSSO maintains 2 browsers for subscriber use: the desktop browser downloaded from the MSSO website and the web-based browser, which requires user ID password. It offers a few more features than the desktop browser. This is a screen snap of the MedDRA desktop browser showing hierarchy of the PT arrhythmia and equivalence of LLTs associated with it. You see the SOC cardiac disorders: HLGT, cardiac arrhythmias, HLT, rate and rhythm disorders not elsewhere classified, and the PT arrhythmia has been expanded to display all LLTs associated with it. 2 LLTs are flagged in red, non-current LLTs. Much more information, including supporting documents titled Points to Consider and resources for training opportunities, are available on the MedDRA MSSO website. Thank you again for downloading this videocast.